me crying, baby, it'll be alright. They told me that the end is near.
They were the biggest stars of the decade. 5 young men, randomly brought together on the X Factor casting stage, became a musical phenomenon the whole world was talking about. Their concerts sold out stadiums, their songs topped the charts, and their faces decorated the walls of millions of teenage bedrooms. But the brighter their success shone, the more secrets the industry tried to hide. Scandals, conflicts, addictions, forbidden romances, and moments the mainstream media refused to report all of it was part of their lives. A group created to bring joy was, in reality, living under constant pressure, tension, and ruthless control. Fans only saw the smiles and rehearsed interviews, but behind the curtain, things were very different. There were fights, tears, and decisions that could have destroyed the group forever. Many stories remain shrouded in mystery, because both media and management worked tirelessly to protect the perfect image. Today, we will reveal the scandals of One Direction that the world was never meant to see. Secret recordings, conflicts that tore them apart from the inside, forbidden videos, personal dramas that changed their fates. This isn't just the story of a boy band. This is the story of how the massive machine of show business creates legends and buries the truth. The truth about One Direction the media didn't want you to know. The story of One Direction began where myths are born on television. In 2010, 5 boys Harry Styles, Louis Tomlinson, Niall Horan, Liam Payne, and Zayn Malik auditioned for the British show The X Factor. Each of them dreamed of a solo career, but fate had other plans. After the judges eliminated them as individual contestants, Simon Cowell made a life-changing proposal to form them into a group. And thus, One Direction was born. At first glance, it was a fairy tale. But from the very beginning, the group was more than just a collection of young talents. It was a carefully engineered project, designed to generate profit. Rumors soon emerged about gag contracts documents that restricted the boys' freedom. They were forbidden to discuss their personal lives, express political opinions, and sometimes even told who they could or could not date. The first scandals came almost immediately. Around Harry and Louis grew the infamous fan theory of Larry Stylinson, the idea that the two were secretly in a romantic relationship. Forums and social media exploded. Fans created fanfics, videos, photo collages. Management reacted aggressively, cutting jokes about Larry out of interviews, forbidding the two from showing too much affection in public. Ironically, this only fueled the fire. At the same time, rumors swirled of Simon Cowell and his team's relentless pressure. The boys were forced into the image of perfect gentlemen. No tattoos, no rebellious stories, no scandals. But behind the scenes, they were still teenagers, and soon the cracks began to show. Tabloids whispered of parties, drinking, girls seen with them by paparazzi. The mainstream media looked the other way. But fans knew, behind the smiles and shining costumes, there was a very different life. Already, One Direction were becoming more than just a boy band. They were turning into a legend where light and darkness coexisted. From the very start, it was clear. Their path to fame would not be easy. And what was hidden in those early years was only a prelude to even greater scandals to come. When One Direction embarked on their world tours, their lives looked like a dream. Packed stadiums, millions of fans, deafening screams at every show. But behind the curtain, it was a nightmare. The schedule was merciless. Dozens of cities, sleepless flights, endless interviews. The boys no longer belonged to themselves. They were a billion-dollar machine, and every month the exhaustion grew. In that environment, the first whispers of addiction began. Musicians not even 20 years old found themselves in a world where alcohol and parties became routine. The loudest scandal was the infamous Peru video of 2014. In it, Zayn Malik and Louis Tomlinson sat in a car, laughing as they smoked a rolled cigarette, openly joking about marijuana. The footage leaked to the press and sparked outrage. For millions of fans who saw One Direction as flawless idols, that image was shattered overnight. Management tried to bury the scandal. There were almost no official comments, and British and American media were quietly told, "Do not ruin the image." But the internet could not be controlled. The video spread across YouTube and Twitter, and fans split into camps. Some defended the boys, others felt betrayed. But this was only the beginning. Behind the stage, members spoke more and more about the crushing pressure, about how they no longer had normal lives. Exhaustion pushed some towards alcohol and wild parties, which were never officially reported but became part of the band's folklore. Rumors swirled that Zayn increasingly broke down during rehearsals and skipped interviews. Louis became the group's rebel, openly rejecting management's rules. Liam later admitted that touring triggered serious problems with alcohol. Even Harry, promoted as the clean, angelic one, was caught in whispers of wild nights, stories carefully kept out of the press. On stage, One Direction remained a symbol of joy. But backstage, fatigue and destruction grew. The perfect machine of One Direction was beginning to crack. And soon those cracks would change the group's destiny forever. Zayn Malik had always been the most enigmatic member of One Direction. His charisma, style, and unique voice made him a fan favorite. But behind the scenes, he seemed the one struggling most with the weight of fame. By early 2015, the rumors of his exhaustion were deafening. Insiders claimed Zayn constantly complained of depression and anxiety, skipped rehearsals, barely survived the relentless schedule. Touring had become torture. He longed to write his own music, to pursue a different style, but contracts and management demanded only one thing: stay part of the One Direction machine. The breaking point came in March 2015. Photos surfaced of Zayn with another woman, and the press pounced, speculating about cheating on his fiancée, Perry Edwards. The scandal erupted instantly. Fans noticed his distant behavior on stage, his absences at shows. Then, on March 25, 2015, the world was stunned. Zayn Malik was leaving One Direction. Millions of fans broke down in tears. Social media descended into chaos. For many, it felt like the group would never be the same again. In his statement, Zayn said he wanted to be a normal 22-year-old guy and escape the constant pressure. But behind those words lay something deeper. Rumors said he was tired of management's control, of being forced into the perfect boy image, of having his creativity ignored. Fans still debate to this day. Did he leave because of personal struggles, or because serious conflicts had erupted inside the group? Louis Tomlinson and Zayn even traded harsh words on Twitter, further fueling the fire. But the fact remained: after Zayn's exit, One Direction was never the same. Their music shifted, their stage presence changed. Zayn launched a solo career, finally free. His debut album, Mind of Mine, was a sensation, proof that he had always wanted to take a different path. Yet with freedom came new demons. Rumors of substance abuse, canceled concerts, fights with labels, unstable behavior. These became the next chapter of his life. But his departure marked the point of no return for One Direction. The group had lost not just a voice, but a part of its soul. And from that moment on, the countdown to the end had begun. One Direction were not just a band. They were a carefully constructed brand, which meant every detail of their lives was controlled, especially their relationships. For millions of fans around the world, these boys were the ultimate fantasy, and any romance could shatter that illusion. One of the most talked about stories was Harry Styles' relationship with Taylor Swift. Paparazzi followed their every move, and the press turned it into a spectacle. But behind the scenes, many whispered it was largely a PR stunt. Both artists' labels used their popularity to boost each other. When the relationship ended, a new storm began. Fans accused Taylor of using Harry, and she released songs that many believed carried veiled references to him. Louis Tomlinson also found himself in the middle of a major scandal when news broke that he was becoming a father. The birth of his child set off a firestorm. Some fans supported Louis, while others clung to theories that the story had been orchestrated by management to distract from rumors about his private life. Zayn Malik spent several years with Perry Edwards of Little Mix. Their engagement seemed like a fairy tale, but the breakup was public and painful. Perry later revealed she found out about it through a text message. The scandal hit not only her, but millions of fans who believed in their love story. Liam Payne also became a target of scrutiny for his relationship with singer Cheryl Cole. Their romance sparked shock and endless speculation. The age difference, media pressure, debates about how genuine it was. Liam later admitted that during that time, he struggled deeply with alcohol and mental health issues. Perhaps the strangest case was Niall Horan. Unlike the others, his love life remained almost entirely hidden. Paparazzi occasionally caught him with women, but official relationships were rarely confirmed. Many fans believed Niall had been chosen by management to preserve the cleanest, most wholesome image. And of course, there was the theory that divided the fan base for over a decade. Larry Stylinson. Thousands of fans believed Harry and Louis were secretly together, and that management did everything possible to suppress it. The theories grew wild. Fans studied photos, videos, even body language in search of proof. Whether it was real or just fan imagination remains a mystery. But the fact that management worked so aggressively to shut it down only fueled the rumors further. In the end, the personal lives of One Direction never truly belonged to them. They became part of the contract, part of the image, part of the myth. Some romances were showcased, others were hidden, and still others weaponized by the media. Behind the smiles and the songs were personal dramas fans only learned about through fragments of gossip. And these stories were one of the reasons the tension inside the group kept growing. On stage, One Direction always looked like a family. Jokes, hugs, laughter, it all created the image of perfect brotherhood. But behind the scenes, the reality was very different. 5 young men, trapped in a golden cage of fame, worked relentlessly, and the pressure grew heavier every year. Insiders claimed that each member had his own ambitions and his own vision for the music. Harry Styles, from the very beginning, saw himself as a future solo star, pushing toward a more mature sound. Louis Tomlinson, on the other hand, wanted to keep the band closer to its pop roots and fan base. Zayn Malik longed to experiment with R&B, while Liam and Niall tried to hold the balance. All of this inevitably sparked clashes. Management only made things worse. Simon Cowell and his team held the group in an iron grip, crushing any dissent. But the older the boys grew, the harder it became to obey. Rumors spread that some rehearsals turned into open conflicts with shouting matches, even refusals to take the stage. The greatest tension simmered between Harry and Louis. After the Larry Stylinson hysteria, they were forbidden from showing too much closeness in public, and it seeped into their real relationship. Louis later admitted he often felt overshadowed by Harry, who was pushed as the group's face. Fans noticed it too. In interviews, Harry often sat in the middle, got the most camera time, his image used most in promotion. After Zayn Malik's departure, the situation only worsened. The band lost one of its strongest voices, and with it came new divisions. Louis tried to take on more leadership, but fans and media still focused on Harry. Liam later confessed in interviews that he clashed badly with both Louis and Zayn, and that the atmosphere inside the group had become unbearable. Officially, none of this was ever admitted. In interviews, One Direction kept smiling, insisting they were best friends, but sharp-eyed fans noticed the cracks. Louis' gaze when asked about Harry, Zayn's visible frustration in his final months, the coldness between certain members. These subtle details told a different story, one the media avoided. Those internal conflicts became one of the main reasons for the group's downfall. Behind the smiles were arguments. Behind the friendship, rivalry. Behind the brotherhood, disappointment. One Direction continued playing the role of a happy boy band, but inside, everything was already coming apart. And the only question was, when would the illusion finally collapse? In 2016, One Direction officially announced a hiatus. For fans, it was devastating, but many clung to hope that the break was only temporary. Soon, however, it became clear. The group would never be the same again. Each member went his own way, but with freedom came new scandals. Liam Payne was one of the most candid. In interviews, he confessed to battling depression and alcohol abuse. His relationship with singer Cheryl Cole triggered a media frenzy. The age gap, constant tabloid coverage, and the birth of their son. Later, Liam admitted his life during that period was chaos, and only after the band split did he begin to face his struggles. Louis Tomlinson endured heartbreaking personal tragedies. In 2016, his mother died, followed a few years later by his sister. These losses came as he was trying to launch a solo career. Adding to his turmoil, Louis was arrested at LAX after an altercation with paparazzi. Though later cleared, his name was splashed across headlines once again. Zayn Malik's solo career began explosively. His debut album was a sensation, his singles topping charts. But soon came setbacks, canceled concerts, whispers of substance abuse, erratic behavior, and high-profile breakups, including his turbulent relationship with Gigi Hadid. Fans who once hoped for his freedom and happiness increasingly saw only his inner battles. Niall managed to avoid major scandals. His solo music was warmly received, and he maintained his boy-next-door image. Still, the press occasionally tried to drag him into rumors of secret romances or hidden feuds with former bandmates. And then there was Harry Styles, who rose to global superstardom. His solo career surpassed all expectations. Worldwide tours, chart-topping hits, roles in major films. Harry transformed from the boy band kid into a cultural icon. But with that came new rumors about his sexuality, hidden romances, and his growing distance from the others. Life after One Direction revealed the truth. Each member carried his own demons. Some handled them better than others, but none remained unchanged. On stage, they had been a single force. Alone, each had to face the brutal reality of show business, where every scandal becomes part of your story. One Direction weren't just a band. They became a cultural phenomenon. Millions of teenagers across the globe didn't just listen to their music. They lived it, breathed it, dreamed of meeting them, and built entire worlds around their idols. The Directioners' fan base became a force so powerful that journalists called it nothing less than a new Beatlemania. The scenes at concerts were almost surreal. Girls fainted, sobbed, screamed so loudly the band had to wear special earpieces to block the noise. Some fans camped outside hotels, staked out tour buses, even snuck backstage. Social media turned into a battleground. Any rumor, photo, or scrap of news spread like wildfire. Directioners created memes, fan fiction, even full-blown investigations. They crafted elaborate theories about the boys' private lives, hunted for secret signs in lyrics, analyzed every photo for evidence of hidden relationships or unspoken closeness. The loudest example was the Larry Stylinson theory. Fans insisted Harry and Louis were a secret couple and that management hid the truth. Tens of thousands of posts, fan videos, and even entire archives of evidence flooded the internet. The musicians themselves repeatedly said it wasn't true, but every gesture, every glance was instantly turned into a new argument. Fan obsession sometimes became dangerous. Louis Tomlinson admitted he was stalked outside his home, with fans waiting for his family. Harry Styles once faced a situation where a fan managed to breach his property. Online, stories regularly surfaced of people willing to do anything for a chance to meet their idols. And yet it was the fans who made One Direction a legend. Without the Directioners, the band might have remained just another Simon Cowell project. Instead, they became a cult, one that lived not only on stage but in the hearts of millions. That fan energy was their greatest engine and their greatest pressure. The more they were loved, the higher the expectations climbed. And eventually, those expectations became unbearable, even for the members themselves. When One Direction shot to the top, it seemed they had everything: money, freedom, fame. In reality, that was the moment their dependence on the industry began, turning them from musicians into a brand. At the center stood Simon Cowell, the man who assembled them on the X Factor and turned the group into a goldmine. Alongside came the contracts that bound the members for years. According to insiders, these agreements were strict. The boys received only a fraction of the billions generated by the One Direction brand. The lion's share went to labels, managers, and producers. Tours, endorsements, merchandise. Every t-shirt with the band's logo brought in millions. Yet the members' actual take was often far smaller. Rumor has it the contracts were signed at the very beginning, when none of the boys could grasp the scale of what lay ahead. Back then, they agreed to anything just to stay in the project. Fans bought tickets and albums, believing they were supporting their favorites. But the reality was different. One Direction became the industry's ultimate cash cow. Their lives were dictated by contracts: where to perform, what to say, how to look, even whom they could date. Even after the band announced their hiatus, talk persisted that some members were still tied to legacy obligations. The rumor mill claimed that this is why they couldn't immediately make radical solo moves. Freedom was, in many ways, an illusion. Because of these contracts, people still debate whether One Direction were ever truly a free band or a project controlled by producers all along. The answer may be obvious. The millions flowed upward, while the musicians themselves received not just fame, but relentless pressure. In that race for money, everyone lost, and the harsh contract system became one of the reasons the band couldn't survive. One Direction's image was meticulously crafted. Smiles, friendship, songs about first love and joy. But behind that facade were rules few spoke about. Contracts limited their freedom, not only in music, but in speech. Insiders claim that early on the boys were explicitly forbidden to discuss politics, religion, or social issues. Every interview was tightly controlled by management. If a journalist asked the wrong question, the answer was cut. The toughest taboo was their private lives. Romantic relationships were carefully managed. They were discouraged from openly dating. And when romances did surface, they were often folded into PR strategy, all to preserve the illusion of availability, to keep fans believing they had a chance. The Larry Stylinson saga was the clearest example. Harry and Louis had joked and acted very close in public. Fans immediately spun theories about a secret romance. Instead of ignoring it or calmly addressing it, management moved aggressively to suppress it, cutting crowd chants of Larry from footage, separating Harry and Louis at events, seating them apart. Rumors even spread that new clauses were added to their contracts, forbidding public discussion of the topic. Any attempt to talk about life backstage was shut down. Louis once hinted that things weren't as rosy as they seemed, and his words vanished from the final interview cut. After leaving, Zayn Malik said he no longer felt like himself, that he was literally forbidden from being who he wanted to be. Even the music was controlled. When members wanted to experiment with genres, producers rejected ideas to protect the formula. One Direction had to remain the clean boys for teens. These bans and that censorship created not only internal strain, but a paradox. The more management tried to hide, the harder fans searched for forbidden signs. That tug-of-war between the official image and the members' real lives became the slow burn that ultimately tore the group apart from within. I have discovered in the Bastion, when millions of fans track your every move, the smallest detail becomes a sensation. Over the years, dozens of conspiracy theories grew around One Direction, many of which still fascinate fans. The most famous, of course, was Larry Stylinson. Believers insisted Harry and Louis were together and that management hid it at all costs. Entire repositories of evidence emerged online. Photos where they supposedly held hands, looks on stage, lyrics fans read as hints. Some accounts cataloged thousands of items, analyzing every movement and turning their lives into a detective story. But it wasn't the only theory. Whispers claimed Zayn's exit was orchestrated, that his rebel image had been groomed to stoke interest in his solo career and extend the One Direction brand's life. There's no hard proof, but the timing, the scandals, the chatter, the rapid release of a solo album made many believe it. Darker theories went further, that the band was an industry project designed to manipulate teenagers and mint billions. Contracts, controlled private lives, manufactured romances, all of it fed the idea that One Direction were part of something larger than a boy band. Even song lyrics were put under the microscope. Fans saw hidden messages, hints about relationships, metaphors for captivity. YouTube essays dissected every line, arguing the boys were secretly communicating with their audience through music. Of course, plenty of these theories bordered on fantasy, but one fact remained. The more management tried to control and censor, the more intense the search for secrets became. And perhaps that's what turned One Direction from a band into a myth, and myths always outlive reality. It's been more than 7 years since One Direction announced their hiatus, yet millions of fans still ask the same question: will they reunite? Every year, the rumors return. Insiders say talks are underway. Fans find secret signs matching social posts, chance encounters, suggestive interview lines. The internet erupts at the slightest hint the five might share a stage again. Reality is more complicated. Harry Styles is now a global superstar. Solo albums, film roles, world tours. For him, returning to a boy band could feel like a step backward. Zayn Malik continues his solo path, but instability and past conflicts with former bandmates cloud reunion hopes. Liam Payne has said more than once that he's ready, though his words carry more nostalgia than certainty. Louis Tomlinson, having endured personal tragedy, has repeatedly said One Direction will always be part of him. Niall, who kept his clean image, might be the one bridge between them all. The financial case is enormous. Analysts say a One Direction reunion could generate billions tickets, merchandise, documentaries. For the industry, it would be a gold rush. But the real question is whether they are ready. Years of contracts, pressure, and personal pain left deep marks. A reunion could be not just a celebration for fans, but a new trap for the members themselves. Still, the myth of a return persists. Fans wait, media stoke the flames, and every hint becomes a global headline. Here's the paradox. Even if they never reunite, One Direction are already immortal. Their story isn't only about music, it's a legend about fame, friendship, and the price paid for a dream. Will there be a sequel? No one knows. But one thing is clear: One Direction will forever remain a symbol of a generation. And the question, reunion or the end, has become an eternal myth that only strengthens their story. The story of One Direction is more than the tale of a boy band. It's the story of an entire generation that grew up to their songs. For millions, They weren't just musicians, they were a dream, a symbol of friendship and hope, proof that 5 ordinary boys could conquer the world. But behind the dazzling smiles was another reality: contracts that limited their freedom, tours that became an endless marathon, rules that stripped them of the right to be themselves, scandals silenced, and tragedies left unspoken. One Direction weren't just a band. They were an industry project, built to the smallest detail. Every step was controlled, every glance analyzed, every mistake a threat to a billion-dollar brand. And yet, it was precisely in their imperfections that fans found something to love. Behind the perfect boy image, they sensed real people with pain, flaws, and dreams. Fans were the key to it all. Without Directioners, there would have been no sellouts, no records, no legend. They created the cult of One Direction, turned them into myth, and granted them internet immortality. But that love was a trap too. The more adored they were, the less they could afford to be authentic. After the split, each member went his own way. Some rocketed to global stardom, some sank into personal turmoil, some preserved themselves, and some barely outpaced their demons. Together or apart, they will always be one story. And today, when fans keep asking, will they reunite? The answer remains open. Maybe they'll never share a stage again. Or maybe one day, music, memories, and the roar of billions of voices will bring them back. But in truth, One Direction have already achieved what most artists never do. They've become a myth. Their songs still soundtrack parties. Their videos still rack up millions. Their scandals and secrets still spark forum battles. Even without the band, One Direction live on in hearts, in memories, in culture. Because true legends don't disappear, they stay with us. And if tomorrow, the world hears those first chords of What Makes You Beautiful sung by 5 voices, millions will remember why One Direction became the brightest phenomenon of their time. This is a story of fame and downfall, of friendship and conflict, of truth and myth. Above all, it's a story that behind every legend stand real people. People who once became the symbol of an era. Their names were Harry, Louis, Niall, Liam, and Zayn. Together, they were One Direction, and their legend will never fade.